Amazing. Thank you so much. And I can see that actually a lot of people checked in, which is really good. This is our first webinar. I'm Isabelle Meyer, co-founder of ZENDATA, a cybersecurity company that we started 12 years ago out of Geneva. And we are now all over the GCC. And we are kickstarting this series of webinar, and we couldn't kickstart it better than having David Colombo in the studio with us in Bahrain at the American University. Usually you're more on Bloomberg, the Business Insider. Like, really, thank you so much for being with us.
No, it's a pleasure being here, and I'm really looking forward to what we are going to discuss in the next hour.
Thank you. And we also have Steven Meyer joining us from Abu Dhabi as well. Steven, co-founder of ZENDATA.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you. I'm really sorry. I have a bit of a delay with the sound, so I don't know how it feels. There we go. I think this is better. Excellent. Thank you. Actually, Steven, just a little introduction about yourself, please. Apart from being famous for breaking password the quickest in the world of 8 characters and less, please just let us know a little bit more about you.
Well, I'm the co-founder of ZENDATA. I'm a cybersecurity engineer, and I'm working on how to make the world a safer place.
Thank you. I think we're all trying to do this, right? We wanted to do this webinar to kickstart a bit of a trend of something different in cybersecurity, right? We're used to have all of those, events, all of this, always around a bit of the same subject. So please, if you have questions, do not hesitate. I'm pretty sure you can type them. And at the end of the webinar, we're going to get through them. And if we don't have the time to go through all of them, we're going to answer them on the LinkedIn account of ZENDATA. No worries about that. So just, Steven, looking back at last year, 2023, was there, in your opinion, any biggest breach that really surprised you in terms of uniqueness, that was different? Please walk us through this.
Yes, thank you, Isabelle. So definitely 2023 has been a very busy year. I think there were many breaches, many attacks, many incidents, but definitely there was one that took my mind and really, I think, monopolized the thoughts of most of the cybersecurity people. It's the Microsoft breach. And I'm not talking about the one that happened 3 weeks ago. I'm talking about the one that happened last summer from Storm 558 China. And for the people who are listening and don't remember what happened, actually it was in April 2021 that Microsoft had a server, a cloud server that crashed. And inside this server, there were some secret keys. And well, a server from Microsoft crashing, there's nothing unusual on this. I think we're all used to it. But the problem is that when you have a Microsoft device or appliance that crashes, it creates what we call a crash dump, where it takes everything in memory and stores this. And since the server was a key server, well, the keys were stored in the crash dumps, and they were sent to an analyst at Microsoft to be analyzed. And of course, because shit happens, the device of the analyst was compromised with a malware, and this malware was owned by Chinese threat actors who then were able to exfiltrate this key. The main problem is actually this key was enabled to grant access to every Office 365 tenant in the world. This means there was something like 400 million plus mailboxes that could be compromised by this stolen key. So luckily, well, I don't know, luckily only 60,000 mailboxes were abused with this, mainly from the US State Department. But this shows how dangerous the whole situation is. And I think if we take a step back and think about it, where all or so many organizations are using Office 365 and Microsoft Stack, and it kind of works like magic. We don't really understand what's happening in the end, and we kind of trust Microsoft to do the best what's happening over there. And again, I can say whatever I want from Microsoft. I'm an ex-Microsoft employee, so I get like the free card to go through this. And so we kind of trust so much Microsoft to doing well their job, and having something as basic as a stolen key from 2021 that was stolen and enabled access to every tenant is really something worrisome. Especially, I mean, it was Chinese and they were really here for government espionage. But if it was like a ransomware crew, or if it was like North Korea, it could have been a much more destructive attack and something that really would have been terrible. And I think this is really eye-opening for everyone in the industry, also for other governments and corporations. And I think Microsoft's really going to have to up its game in 2024 and the next decade in order to get up to the standards that we expect.
Yeah, definitely. We didn't hear enough about it, actually, but I can feel that all the Microsoft lovers will start writing on our private chat room. It's gonna get like a little bit lit up, but it's true. And in terms, I don't, David, on your side, in terms of all those ransomware attacks, did you notice any patterns, any activities that actually surprised you?
Well, not necessarily one that surprised me, but we do see a massive increase in the healthcare sector. So we saw that a 44% increase, actually, attacks on hospitals, even children's hospitals that are now getting attacked, because threat actors realize they can build so much more pressure, they can build so much more leverage when they attack things that actually affect human lives, when they attack things that are actually, well, critical infrastructure, right? So I think there is a slight shift to certain things where they can build that higher pressure, including other parts of critical infrastructure as well. And I think that's a trend I really don't want to see, but unfortunately, we'll probably see it continue this year as well. And then on the other side, there's this massive shift in the enterprise landscape, right? We move to cloud, it changes how we build software. We now have the SDLC, and we also have APIs everywhere, right? Whether that's a toaster, a smart fridge, or whatever it is nowadays, we have APIs everywhere. So that's something that threat actors are definitely looking at attacking more and more. And on top of that, they now take your data, and that is, we've seen a massive increase as well, where they actually sell your data, extort you with data, because traditionally ransomware, well, it encrypted your data, and that was it. And now threat actors realize there's so much valuable insights in your data as well that they can use themselves, so they can sell to others. So we see a number of those trends coming, and they just continue probably.
Yeah, data is definitely the new oil. But it's true that with the hospital sector, and I've seen it in the GCC, I've seen it in Europe. It's difficult. You have all those legacy systems, you have budget issues, but it's true that there's more and more attacks. I mean, there's like one popping up every week. It's quite crazy on this side. I don't know, Steven, last year, have you seen or noticed any cybersecurity tools that was like, wow, this is actually good, everybody should start looking at these ones?
So I could use the buzzword AI, but I think there's already been 200 webinars just talking about AI, and I guess the audience would like to hear about something else. So if we take a step back and think about how cybersecurity works, essentially we're a reactive industry. It's already so hard to protect against the known attacks that we're facing. We're not going to expect the organizations to protect themselves against attacks that don't even exist but could exist. So the way we can evaluate our industry would be how fast we are able to create tools, to adapt the existing tools to new upcoming threats. And I think we were very lucky last year because there was a perfect example about this, and it was the malicious QR codes in emails. So QR codes, we've all seen too many of them since the COVID. I mean, some people love them. I'm not part of this loving team of QR codes, but it happened during the summer where suddenly there was a new wave of malicious QR codes sent by email. Sometimes it was a picture in an email. Sometimes it was an attachment. Sometimes it was something always different, but with this QR code. And the idea was really for people to scan with their phone the QR code in order suddenly to bring them to a malicious site and do something kind of off of band. So it was very interesting because the industry did not have an answer for this, especially the email security gateways. And we could see how quickly suddenly tools were developed or adaptations were created. And it's not as simple as just saying, okay, let's just scan all the images for QR codes and see what gets up, because this consumes so much CPU on the email security gateways, it would not be sustainable. And again, if we spend too much money protecting ourselves compared to the effort the threat actors are doing, we're losing the game. So we have to find this balance. And really the industry was very, very fast to react. I mean, Microsoft, again, had a little issue on this side. They were a little bit slow. But in general, it was really impressive. And in October, 22% of the phishing emails had QR codes. And now, so it's something that started in the summer with the peak in October. And now suddenly it's an issue that is not talked about anymore. So I think we can give ourselves a tap on the back and congratulate ourselves, because at the end of the day, the industry worked and reacted correctly to a threat. I'm happy.
It's very true, but I think people are still not so much aware how QR code are dangerous. I mean, you should be scanning everything that easily. And I remember a couple of months ago, I was at a cybersecurity conference, and the first thing they asked was to scan the QR code so we can enter in a contest. And I was like, well, they're testing us, right? They just want to know how many people will actually do it. And no, it was true. It's like, be doing this. I mean, this is like the worst idea to kickstart a conference, but I think this is really important. And David, in terms of hacking technique, did you notice a new threat like last year, or?
Well, a couple of very interesting aspects on that when we talk about what threat actors are leveraging now. And I think there's a lot more focus on zero-day vulnerabilities now as well from the threat actor side. And we've seen it with the MOVEit vulnerability that really allowed extensive access to a lot of organizations very easily for threat actors. And if we now take a look at why threat actors are doing it, well, because they have the resources now, right? They first see the value of getting access to all of those systems. And you could actually say, I mean, cybercrime groups are now run like organizations, right? They have HR departments, they have support chats, they have all of that. So they also heavily invest into R&D. They invest a lot into research, trying to find all of those new innovative ways into organizations. And well, zero days are one of the most valuable assets that they then have. Vulnerabilities that no one knows about. The industry doesn't know about it. The organizations don't know about it, and they can leverage that to get into it. And we've seen it from nation state threat actors already that had those massive budgets, but now that is also, I feel like, moving more into the cybercrime group side.
No, definitely. And understanding those threat actors and their landscape and how they are there to, you can only protect yourself if you know who is going to attack you and how. So this is the next step that we have to move forward. And on that, I have a question for you, Steven. Well, actually, I'm going to also ask you this question, David. But if you would have a time machine and you would go back at the beginning of 2023, which cybersecurity incident would you stop if you can only pick one?
Well, first of all, if I have a
You didn't
time
expect
machine,
this one.
yeah, if I have a time machine and I can go in the past, the first thing I'll do is look myself in the mirror and look at myself 1 year younger, with less white hair and maybe more hair on the head. And this, for me, it's already a big win, not only for me, but I believe for the whole industry. Listen, more seriously, when I look back at last year, there was one incident that really disappointed me a lot. And David, you just said 2 words about it previously. It's the MOVEit incident. So just to remind everyone, MOVEit is actually a WeTransfer for enterprise, to put it very simply, that you install in your environment. And what happened is the club ransomware gang, they discovered the ODE in the MOVEit platform and started attacking it and exploiting it. Where it was really, really disappointing is that the first victim, actually, it happened in May. And there were in total 2,700 victims. So if I could go back in time, I would go in May, wait for the first victim to happen, and then call all the other people that had the MOVEit appliance and tell them disconnected from the internet. Because I cannot understand how the head of cybersecurity of an organization that saw that there were 2,699 organizations that got hacked by MOVEit, and he was like, yeah, it won't happen to me. But actually, everybody reacted this way. Nobody disconnected. So they would say, yeah, there's a patch and it seems it's going to work. Don't take the risk. When you think about it, there were 94 million individuals impacted by this. And if you look at the last statistics of what it means as a financial impact, it would be the equivalent of $50 billion lost because of this. So again, Klopp did not make all this money. It's just money that burned out because people did not do correctly the job. So let's travel back in time and let's save all the people who have Move It by not using the Move It tool, please.
No, definitely. And communication is key. You really put your finger on something really important. David, would it be Move It as well if you would have this time machine, or are you thinking about another one?
Well, now that I know that Steven is going to take care of Move It, it's probably another one that I can look at as well. And I've been talking about airplanes and the aviation sector for some time now, because that is, and I always like to say, when I did the Tesla story, I mean, it was still a car, it was bound to the road. But now if we take a look at airplanes, I mean, they fly, they can have a lot more critical impact, right? So earlier last year, Boeing got hacked by a cybercrime group, and they got access to a vast majority of their data. And they didn't get access to any aircraft systems or something like that, but they got access to the corporate network of Boeing. And I feel like they got a lot of insights out of that, which now is going to make it a lot easier for them to understand how the systems work and maybe find subsequent vulnerabilities. So that is one, just because of the criticality of the company. That's one that I really would have liked to prevent.
No, definitely. And it's opening the door to, some stuff we don't want to see. And talking about this, Steven, let's look at 2024 now. I think it's very important, and everybody that's listening to this webinar now should take their notepad and start writing. What are we looking at in 2024? What are we facing in terms of cybersecurity? What should be the new measure to adopt?
Good question. So if I had the magic ball, actually, I would like to have the time machine to go back from 2025 to this webinar so I can tell you exactly what's going to happen and how we should protect ourselves. I said I will not use a buzzword, but definitely AI is going to be a hot topic for 2024, and it is a hot topic. We've seen threat actors use it, not that much the extremely qualified or skilled threat actors like government or the big ransomware groups, where actually they have all the skills and they don't really need AI in order to do it. But it's more the amateurs ones, the non-sophisticated ones that are able to use AI in order to up the game and have more skills. And actually what's going just makes that the level of cybersecurity for everyone is going to have to increase. The bar is put higher because even small threat actors can do a big impact. Yeah. And this goes in many different things because, for example, when I talked before about the Move It and the Clop ransomware gang, Clop, actually, they did not put an encryption during the ransomware. They were just stealing data and publishing it. But when you steal terabytes of data, there's no use to it. But you have AI, you have large language models, and they can do something amazing. You can give them terabyte of data, and you ask them a question like, who's the most corruptible one? Who's the one who's been stealing money? Which one is the trade secret? What are the projections? And it's going to take out this information. So I guess that the value of stolen data is going to really, really increase with AI because suddenly people are going to be able to crunch it. So less encryption and more data theft are definitely going to be an issue for 2024. If we take more a step back and not talk too much about AI, definitely the cloud is where the threats are happening and are going to happen even more. Misconfigured clouds. We've seen the number of malware on Linux that has skyrocketed, not because you have more end users on Linux. Still, everybody's using Windows. You see, Microsoft is still top on your game. But it's because you have all these servers that are running Linux that are just hosted on the internet, hosted on the cloud, and people don't take care of it. So definitely protection of the cloud, protection of the identity, Linux devices are going to be where things are going to happen in 2024.
No, definitely. That's fair enough, specifically with the cloud. And in terms of extortion campaigns, what's coming up? Do you have any strategy, David, that everybody that's listening to us should start adapting?
Well, I mean, do cybersecurity the right way. I mean, that's where we actually have to start. And what I mean by the right way, because there's not this one formula that fits everyone, but we have to start pushing it up to the board level. We have to start pushing it up to the executives. We really have to have the company be aware of it and really, well, I would like to say breathe cybersecurity, right? Because I'm doing that. But for a lot of organizations, it's still that risk that is somewhere placed under IT, and that's it. And I think we need to take it out of there. We need to have CISOs, we need to have chief information security officers that speak with the board, that speak with the high-level executives, and actually can implement a strategy across the entire organization. And prevention is really important to prevent cyber attacks and prevent vulnerabilities within the network. But at some point, the hackers, they will find a way, whether that's a new zero-day, whether that's an insider threat, or a number of those things. And that's where moving to detection and response is going to be so important, that we quickly detect cyber attacks as early as they take place and then be able to respond effectively. And if we hear the numbers that sometimes threat actors are in networks for like 6 months without being detected, I mean, that should raise red flags. So we first have to make it this priority within the organization, and then really also focus on detection and response and being able to see those threat actors very early on, as soon as they start.
No, definitely. And I remember when we started to talk a while ago and you were looking through our stack and you said, wait a minute, you can notice like attack staging and these kinds of things. And I said, yeah, this is something we've been doing for years. And David was quite surprised because he's like, if there would be more people doing that, you know, you're really cutting a lot of chances for those kinds of attack, because as soon as there's a domain purchase, for example, that will be used to launch attack, and if you have a takedown extremely quickly, well, you're not giving even a chance to launch the attack, right? So we really have to tackle this angle a little bit more. But it's true what you're saying about the board. And I remember I was asked, where should I start? And it's true, a lot of companies come to us and like, okay, I can't do everything at the same time. Where should I start? And it sounds a bit stupid, but start with the board. The board, the management of the company needs to understand what we want to do, need to have like the same vision. Because if you're doing 3 steps forward and then, they bring you back a couple of steps backward, you're not going anywhere. And talking about the tooling, and I mean, and Steven, you can dive in regarding the attack staging, but what do you think now, 2024, like really in terms of tooling, what should implement this year if they can do like few things?
Yes, so going back to what you talked about, the moving left or anticipating these attack staging, I think definitely this is somewhere where there's a lot of focus that has to be put on, as well as this detection and response, which is actually totally on the right-hand side of the attack chain. For those of you who followed, we had AnyDesk on Friday evening that gave us a little surprise by announcing a breach. And actually, they discovered the breach during an audit. So no audit, they would have never discovered it. And this is really something that's totally on the right-hand side. But on the other hand, we are all saying, well, if we can avoid the incident to happen at the beginning, in the very early stages, then we kind of win the whole game. So this really shows that there is this whole principle of detection at multiple places, protection at multiple places, that are so essential. And even though talking about security in depth is not as sexy as it was 20 years ago, because you have new buzzwords that we have to use nowadays, it really reflects something extremely important in the way to tackle the kill chain during the whole process. Going back to your question, because I know you asked a question and I have to answer it. There's been a lot of buzz around EDRs, and I think now all the organizations in the world have an EDR that are deployed. And if not, please call us, because you really need to have one. But I really think that now we're moving into this new era where the attack doesn't really happen on the computer in the traditional sense. The attack is going to happen somewhere else. So, and I'm not going to go into the OT and IoT environment yet. I'm just going to go on the smartphones for starters. I mean, we all heard the scandals around Pegasus and all these kinds of things that stress so many people. Well, at the end of the day, not so many people took action how to protect themselves. And if I need to spy someone, if I need to harm someone, definitely the smartphone is where I'm going to put some effort. And nowadays, you start to have a real industry of EDRs for smartphone that ensure your privacy, that don't consume all the battery. And I think this is where people should start putting some focus. Another place where you have computers that are not protected, and we talked about it before, is the cloud. And your access to the cloud is your identity. So protecting the devices that are always connected to the internet, accessible from anyone, from anywhere. This, you have to put some love in, you have to protect it, and definitely monitoring the identity. Who are the users who can connect? How they can connect? When you have OAuth, authentications, credentials, keys that are distributed, how are they used? Who are they using it? I mean, all these questions need to have an answer. And again, talking about this to the board is really tricky because it's technical. It's not really sexy. It's not buzzwords, but definitely this is how you can solve your issues and your problems.
Yeah, and there's also ways to talk to the board as well, right? Depending of your risk exposure and what you want to implement, there's way to really bring it up, because adding toolings will reduce your risk exposure as well. And this is the words that they understand. So you put in terms of risk, money, and you put that into a cybersecurity maturity plan, and this is where you can actually start having a conversation. But Steven, you really touched something super important, and because David is with us, not only that you act at Tesla, but OT, IoT environment is something you know very well, and it's something you've seen now going where it gets very dangerous. So in your opinion, people that have OT, IoT, IOMT environment, what should they do?
Well, they should also start with making it this priority, because if we take a look at all of those environments, a lot of them are, well, legacy environments that have been around for a long time. And a lot of those protocols, if you look at them, they haven't been built with security in mind. I mean, some OT protocols, they don't have authentication built in, because when they were programmed, I mean, authentication wasn't, no one really considered it. And no one thought that we are going to be in a time where threat actors are going to try to hack our power grids, for example. So OT also make it as priority, bring it up to the board, have it be a priority within the entire organization. And then we have to implement similar things that we already figured out for endpoints. I mean, we figured out for the Windows endpoint, well, first you do updates and you're patching, and then you get EDR, right?
Yeah.
Well, the question with OT is, how do we get EDR if we can't install anything on those endpoint legacy systems, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's going to be so much more important to focus on the monitoring and quick detection aspect, not on the device itself, but also in the entire environment and organization around it. So first, we need to have the monitoring of the entire OT network, since a lot of times we don't get access to the individual device. And then we need to expand it to the entire broader organization that also includes the IT environment. And unfortunately, what we see now, with smart cities, for example, it's merging actually. So we are now merging all of those physical systems with IT systems, right? So we really have to focus on the holistic security aspect of that, and we can't see it as those silos that are in between those things. And what I always, and I'm pretty sure that Steven agrees with me on that, if we take a look at whether that's OT or IT securing it, we have to look at the basics a lot of times, right? Because if we are reading like incident reports, it's not, a lot of times when organizations get hacked, whether that's small organizations, large organizations, even banks, it's not like, oh, this sophisticated threat actor, and they had so much money and they had this entire team. A lot of time, it's really just an server connected to the internet that's not patched, that doesn't have the right updates, right? So that is giving access to a lot of organizations, and this could also be a huge risk with those OT environments once they become more accessible, right? So patching is going to be really important, and then focusing on that holistic monitoring as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I like a lot what you said on this, and it can even join back to what Isa said previously about involving the board. If I have to disconnect a few computers or a few servers, it's okay. If I have a smelting machine, smelting oven, and if I turn it off, well, it means for 3 months I cannot turn it back on, and I have to wait. Well, you need the board to kind of understand the risk and support you in the decisions they're going to take when you decide to disconnect your OT environment. And the consequences of incidents, or even of incident response in the OT environment, is something that's much more worrisome than when you say, well, my website has been offline, it's terrible, we lost revenue, but we only lost a little bit of revenue for a few days, not disrupt the whole organization for months. And this is really where, again, if you don't have the board that's online with you, if you don't have this connection with the top management, whatever you're going to do in a silo, the day shit hits the fan, you're going to be stuck in a situation that you don't want to be in.
No, and I mean, I've seen it. I have conversation with entities that even when we start talking about OT, IoT, they're like, oh, no, not yet. Well, you need to have a whole vision of your infrastructure. I mean, this is how it works. I'd like to open up something. I might surprise you a bit on that, but since I have the both of you on the offensive and defensive side, um, when we're talking about pen testing toolings, right? And when we're talking about threat actors right now, about 80% of them, they're actually using commercial toolings that are out there on the market. You can purchase them. They've been created by companies that are legal companies. They're listed on the stock exchange, or you talk about Cobalt Strike, for example, is one of them that's very famous. Well, famous for people in the industry. What's your opinion on that? Because I'm pretty sure you guys not going to think about the same way, right? Should it be a trend that continues? What's because there's kind of an ethical dilemma to it as well, right? Steven, what do you think about that?
So first, while I talk about it, I took the liberty to start a little poll so people can share their opinions. Some of them already have an opinion.
Nice.
Some of them already have an opinion, so I'm sure they can already vote for it. And probably some others don't yet have an opinion, so they're going to listen to the debate in order to figure it out. So I'm happy to start this, but I warn you, David, whatever you say, I'm going to counterattack you. So be ready, because
I feel like
have
it's like a presidential campaign
Yes,
debate,
exactly. I have a very strong opinion on this, and I know that we don't share it. And for everybody listening, we did not rehearse, so neither of us know the arguments of the other one on this topic. So definitely, I mean, I think, to take a step back, it doesn't make sense for the cybersecurity industry to create tools to validate the cybersecurity industry, and these tools are actually the ones that create the industry. Putting it differently, imagine if my objective is to sell bulletproof vests, and what I do, I give guns for free to everyone and then say, look, there's a problem of guns, you have to buy my bulletproof vest. It doesn't make sense. I mean, yes, it makes sense financially, but this really disrupts the whole industry. And I think simply this argument should be enough for people to say, no, we should not create solutions that actually are making the life easier to threat actors in order to do something for us to make money at the end. Because even if we don't make money at the end, we're doing something that's facilitating crime, and I think it should not happen.
Well, I like the example that he gave with the guns and the bulletproof vests, but the guns were there before, right? I mean, we had cyber attacks and threat actors before we even started creating commercial tools, and we created them for audits, for pen testing, for security research as well, right? So I think at some point it's a lot better that that the industry knows which tools the threat actors are using, and we're using similar tools, because then we know exactly what's coming, right? I mean, if we take a look at Cobalt Strike, I mean, everyone now looks for Cobalt Strike beacons in a network because we know that threat actors are using that, right? I think it would be a lot worse if we don't know what threat actors are using, and if they are doing it in the dark, because they're going to develop their own tools anyway. I mean, if we now take away all the commercial or offensive security tools, I mean, threat actors are not going to stop, right? They're just going to start building more of it themselves.
Oh, that's
but why
a
making
fair point. And I was
making the life easier?
But
Sorry,
Steven, I was talking to our CTO, and his comment was really that it's better to actually have it out there and doing it publicly than hiding it.
But we're still making the life of the threat actors easier. I mean, if we were just emulating what they are doing, well, at the end of the day, they would be using their tools and we'd be using our tools. No, they are using our tools to do it. What we invented to simulate them is even better than what they created themselves. I mean, at this stage, we went a little bit too far, I guess. And what's really frustrating me, you know how expensive is Cobalt Strike? $12,000 per year, $1,000 per month to have like the best notch tool to do cyber attacks. It's not even expensive. And you're going to say, yeah, but it's regulated. You know, they're not going to sell it to criminals. When you had the Conti leaks that came out, we discovered that actually the Conti ransomware group purchased it from a cybersecurity company who bought it and sold it to them double price. So they were so happy, they made money on top of it. And so it's not something that we can believe it's going to be regulated. Weapons, and I mean regulation of weapons, physical weapons, is already so complicated, doesn't work well. And it's something physical that crosses borders in trucks, in planes, in boats. Now, imagine if it's software, how can you regulate this? And there's this huge gray market of people who are stealing. So now the latest version is not available, but the version previously is available. And the result is just we're making the world not safer, but unsafe by creating these tools.
Hold on, because you said it's making the world not safer. And I think we can actually attribute a lot of what the cybersecurity community is doing to access to those tools as well, right? I mean, security research. I'm a security researcher myself, right? So if I have some free time on a Friday afternoon, I might look at certain companies, certain systems connected to the internet, trying to find vulnerabilities and then fix them for the greater good, right? And there are so many breaches that have been prevented because security researchers found those holes and those vulnerabilities before the threat actors did, right? So we would take away this huge advantage that we have of this vast majority of security researchers that spend their time trying to find vulnerabilities, right? I mean, we would actually take away a lot of security vulnerabilities being found if all of those researchers don't have access to their tools anymore, right?
Yes, I know. They can do the research, they can find the problems, they can create POCs, they don't need to commercialize the attack. I mean, there's a step beyond that where the only goal is to financial gain and not pushing the industry forward. I mean, once you have created a POC and how to create a C2 using DNS, you proved it, you have to make a click and run tool for anybody to be able to do it quickly and easily. I'm not sure you push the industry forward, you're just pushing the threat forward.
So I would agree on that there are two parts. One is finding vulnerabilities and one is exploiting them, right? So we still need that huge finding vulnerabilities part. And I agree, we don't need to commercialize and build actual exploitable proof of concepts for those vulnerabilities, but we need to be able to find them, right? And if we already take away and automate and have tools for finding those vulnerabilities for, well, security researchers, organizations to find and report them, well, then on the other side, it's still a lot easier for threat actors because they know exactly what those vulnerabilities are, right? So then they can, again, invest in R&D. And so I'm really not quite sure how much time we would save or how much time those threat actors would have to invest to then go ahead and do all of that.
But it is getting pretty far. And I don't know, like, in everybody that is watching the webinar who actually knew that this existed, right? Do we have access to
The
Yeah,
portal?
so I'm seeing the results. Apparently, I'm not very convincing because
You're not
47% of the people said there should be a tightly regulated market with strict licensing akin to the control of firearms that ensures to ensure only vetted entities have access. But only 17% say it should be forbidden. So clearly, people believe it can be regulated. I doubt a lot about this feasibility.
But I would agree with the majority of the people here, and that's probably kind of the common ground that we have in between, because I also don't think we should go ahead and actually take all of that malware and take all of that those commercial offensive tools and give it to everyone out there freely, right? There should be that as it's in a poll, the tightly controlled market in order for security researchers, security organizations to get access to the tools, but not the criminals, right? And right now, I'm not sure if that's actually implemented the way it should be implemented, right? If we take a look at weapons, I mean, there's a lot of governmental control around it. If we take a look at the cybersecurity market, there's not that much governmental control around it. There's not even a debate around it. I've not seen a debate in, well, US Congress or somewhere else where they actually speak about should we regulate offensive cybersecurity tools. So maybe that's a debate that should happen and we should start talking about it, and we shouldn't leave it to the offensive security manufacturers basically to then go ahead and vet their own customers, right?
That's a fair point.
Because if we follow up on this, I mean, we've seen, for example, on the smartphone spying industry, suddenly a lot of traction, a lot of regulation happening around it, and saying again, companies who want to export, again, the Pegasus of these worlds from an NSO group, I mean, it's considered as a weapon, and there's regulation how it can be exported, to whom, who's allowed to buy it, and we don't see the same thing in pen testing tooling.
But there's also a difference between a tool like Metasploit that a lot of people use to learn and get into
Yeah.
cybersecurity, and something like the NSO group did with Pegasus, where they built a one-click tool to take over mobile devices, right? Because I feel like that's more in the nation state area. I mean, they sold it to intelligence agencies, they sold it to governments to actually go ahead and spy on people. So the purpose for something like Pegasus was to spy on people and get access to the private information. If we take a look at a tool like Metasploit, which could be an offensive tool, you could name it an offensive tool because it is an offensive tool, but it is used for a lot of people to learn about cybersecurity, to get into cybersecurity, and then find vulnerabilities in order to secure a lot of organizations, right? So I feel like there are two different sets of cyber weapons, if you wanna name it that way.
Yeah, sets and usage. But I think what both of you are saying that's very important is discussing and talking about it. Because, I don't know if you have the same feeling, but every time I go to cyber event, we're always talking about the same thing. And there are very important ethical debate that we need to kind of open. And like as people in the industry, we need to start talking about these things, right? Obviously, regulation is extremely important, but it's not the answer. And we've seen it in the physical world, it's the same thing in the cyber. It's not going to be the sole answer to it. Before we get to questions, I don't know if we have the questions as well in the chat, but I'd like to ask, let's say to both of you, okay? Let's say right now, all threat actors would take a break, a year break, okay? What would you recommend doing during this pause? What should company, individual now, if they have a year ahead, should start doing? I want to end in a positive note.
Yes. So I'll give you a very positive note. And again, I did not know this question was going to come up, so I get it as a surprise. Sleep. I think the whole cybersecurity industry needs to sleep. We are all working too much. All the engineers are exhausted. There's a huge pressure, and not only at ZenData, worldwide, it's one of the industry with the most of burnouts. If we can get a year break, oh my God, this would be nice. And then we can learn stuff, we can have new activities, go back to the basics. But just catching up with our rest, it would be something that I believe we would all deserve.
That's true. I mean, the last numbers was what, 4 million cybersecurity engineers lack in the world. It's insane. And we are now at the American University in Bahrain, and there are programs now, not only like in computer science, but are starting to focus more and more on cybersecurity. And I'm very proud to say we're building the first educational SOC for the university. But this needs to happen. But we need to inspire people as well. So I think everybody that's listening to us that is in this field, it's also our role to go out there and talk about cyber and explain what we do on a day-to-day living, right? We're just not looking at, alerts all day and like these kinds of things, right? But it's actually fun.
No,
David, if there would be 1 year ahead, no attacks, nothing, what would you recommend?
well, I really agree on the sleep part that Steven said. I think I slept like a bit over 5 hours tonight. So the whole cybersecurity industry really needs to take a short vacation. And then I would really like to use the time to, advocate for more cybersecurity. The issue that I think is going to happen is everyone's going to be like, oh, well, they stopped, so now we are fine.
Yeah.
Not knowing that they will come back. And we already see that now, right? It's like, oh, we've not seen an attack for, 5 years in our business, so it's never going to happen. Well, because you haven't been attacked for 5 years, it's a lot more likely that you're going to be attacked very soon, right? And we should take all of those people, go out there. And right now, there's so many resources abound while defending attacks. Talking about the coolness of cyber, right? We have so many resources right now sitting in 24/7 security operations centers defending those threat actors. If the threat actors stop, we can take all of those people to go out there, advocate in the industry. And what we also need to do, we need to take out the cybersecurity conversation out of the cybersecurity industry, because a lot of times, and you mentioned this with events as well, a lot of times within that bubble of security, the security community, it's the same conversations. We know a lot of those things that are about to happen. We know a lot of the things that are happening, right? But we also need to speak with everyone else.
Sure.
We need to speak with business executives. We need to speak with other industries. We need to speak with the media. And that's something I know Steven is doing a lot in Switzerland, speaking with the media to get it to everyone out there. And I feel like that's where we can also start tackling the cybersecurity skill shortage. So we could take all of those people that we now have, since there are no attacks anymore, to train the next generation.
Yeah.
And I've been advocating for that in a lot of places. And I was just in Scotland last year, speaking at a university there, because we need to actually show how cool cyber is, right? We always think, it's apps and data and it's behind the screen and it's far away. And now we see that it's actually, like physical devices being attacked, cars, airplanes, hospitals, all of those kinds of things. So we need to take this conversation out there. And I think this webinar is a good first step doing that, actually, to also engage with the broader community. And I know we have a diverse set of listeners here. So I'm really looking forward to continue that conversation. And I really hope that we are going to get this year where this is happening. But I'm afraid.
Yeah, that we get ahead of that curve. But this is wishful thinking. I just really wanted to finish on a positive note. But no, you really have to protect yourself. Is there any question on the chat room, or is there anyone who would like to ask a question while we are still live? If you are too shy or you don't want to ask on the chat room, obviously you can reach out to us at all time. You can also go on our website at zendata.security. You can also write on our LinkedIn page. Is there any, Steven, David, is there any questions that we see through the...
So I see a lot of activity in the chat room, and I see one question in the Q&A. So I'll start with the Q&A, and I think it's for David. And then I'll read in the chat room, see if there's something relevant over here. So in the Q&A, it's someone who's asking, how would you train a generation? What do you suggest? So this is definitely for you, David, because you brought up this topic.
Well, and David, you started, you were like 10 years old. You had this passion, and this is amazing, and you really developed it as well in the good way. You had the right set of values, because it's not given to everybody, unfortunately. But it's true. How would you get the next generation trained? Where would you start?
Well, when I started, I mean, I was just curious, like that was the only thing that drove me doing that. I never sat there and I was like, oh, I'm going to learn how to hack. I'm going to do all of those things. I was just like, no, how does it work? So when I got my first laptop, I was like, oh, it's great that I have this machine. Well, how does it work, right? And something that I thought was so fascinating, literally, it was the best day of my life when I figured out I can just go online and learn about all of those things, right? If we go back 50 years, I mean, you couldn't do that. You didn't have access to all the knowledge and all the information. You needed to go to a library and get a book and read through it. And I was sitting there and I could just learn about all of those technologies, right? And then I kind of got into cybersecurity by accident, actually. I found my first vulnerability by accident. And then I was thinking, I was 13, and I was thinking that this is really interesting. And for one, it was really cool and interesting to learn about hacking. But on the other side, you could already see it's going to be one of the most pressing challenges going forward when we digitalize our entire lives, right? So the topic really grabbed me because I saw how important and how big this is going to be. So I think there are 3 steps to getting a new generation really passionate and really trained. Because we need people, especially right now, that burn for the topic, that really want to do it, and not just people that do it because now it's a great career or you can earn a lot of money, right? And that's something that's so beautiful about tech. Most people that work in there are really passionate about what they do. So first, we need to ignite that spark in them, the curiosity. We need to, and maybe we have some young people listening here as well. So we need to get out there. We need to speak about the work that we are doing. That's something the entire industry has to do, to ignite that spark in people and ignite the curiosity in people. And then we need to give them those opportunities. We need to guide them. And whether that's the American University here or some other places, or even cybersecurity organizations, taking in those people and then guiding them with what they can do and what they can't do.
I think you suddenly muted up. There was a glitch with the audio. We missed your last sentence. No, we don't hear you anymore. So while this issue is the audio, maybe I'll continue until it gets fixed. And maybe to jump on this topic, I had the opportunity in the last... yeah, I hear you now. Yeah. So I had the opportunity for the last 5 years to go and talk at Lausanne University to the future students when they don't know what they want to do for studies. And the first year I talked about cybersecurity, I think I had a room with 10, maybe 12 people. And last year when I did it, so it's every Feb, so it's happening now again. Last year when I did it, we had a room as big as the future law students. So there is attraction, but definitely when you look at this, there's a big lack of women who are interested in this. Definitely there's a lot of effort to be put in on this topic, and people, they don't really know what to expect, and we have to bring to a younger age what to expect. I know, David, you have your idea of doing a TV show, so maybe this would be the good way of making it happen.
We already done one.
A full-fledged TV show, Hollywood style.
Yeah, that would be great.
So if you have any sponsors listening, we're open to do a Hollywood-style TV show about cybersecurity.
No, and those are the things that we need to get people like really see how cool it is. And then on the other side, what I think, and Stephen, probably you agree on that as well, you can't teach like something like hacking, because it's not hack. A lot of universities do that mistake where they go ahead and they are like, oh well, here are those tools, learn how to use those tools, and that's it. That's not how it works. It's really about understanding the system, the infrastructure, and then you go from there. Like, you can't just sit down and be like, oh, I'm going to hack this if you have no idea how it works. So it's not really about using tools or hacking something. It's really about understanding how all of that works together, how that works internally. And then by going through a process of learning more about it and figuring out how it works, that's where you actually find those vulnerabilities in those systems. And that's something we need to show as well, because a lot of times, even at universities, people start studying and they think, oh, it's a hacking bubble thing, and then they learn that and they are done. And that's not how it works. But what I think is so beautiful, especially about the new generation, the opportunities they are growing up with now, having access to knowledge is incredible. I mean, everyone is born curious, right? Everyone always asks why, and how does this work when they're young, and then they grow up. And traditionally, there was always this point where they had to stop asking because, well, first the parents didn't know, then the teachers didn't know. And now they have, to talk about a positive note of AI, now they have AI to continue learning, to continue asking. So I feel like we can actually have the next generation be a lot better than.
But you're really touching an important point. And when you told me about curiosity months ago, and I remember I have 3 daughters, and sometimes you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. And now I actually take the time to be like, wait a second, I will answer you, because you don't want to stop this curiosity. And I'm part of Women in Tech and Women in Cybersecurity in the Middle East, and I really try to go out there and showcase what I'm doing as a woman, although I don't want to be doing this because I'm a woman, but because I'm passionate about what I'm doing. But for me and for the younger generation, what I would say, what I love about this field is every day is different. I can be doing everything. I touch at every infrastructure, kinds of people, countries, governments, public entities, private entity. I get access to sensitive data. I get to know things that other people don't know. I find it amazing, because this is really, I think that if you're not part of this boat now in 2024, I don't know where you're going. You need to get on board, right? Or else this is like just what the future is, this is where we're heading anyway. So that's my part of it. But I think it's all starting with curiosity. And in this field, it's changing constantly. So it is always something new. You can't get bored. Like, you can't get bored. On this, I really want to thank everybody.
Wait,
Steven,
Isa,
one last point.
before you stop this, because there's a debate going on, or a conversation going on in the chat, that I think it's worth catching up, or maybe saying a few words on. And there was a buzzword that was thrown in the chat by Manoj about XDR. He started asking questions about XDR. He dropped the word CrowdStrike. So obviously, I think we maybe our next webinar is going to be sponsored by them if we talk about them, or we get some goodies from them. And I think there were some very meaningful answers that popped up in the comments. So definitely this new approach of having like the security tools working together, synchronizing themselves, and not going from endpoint detection and response, but something that's cross-tooling, going from the firewall, the IDS, the IPS, the email security gateways, the smartphones, the cloud, all of these things combined and giving a single point of view. I think it's something very important. But what came up in the comments, and I think it's worth stressing it out, is that you cannot just rely on tools. And I think this is where many people believe they have a limitation. We bought this tool, we bought CrowdStrike, we're on the top right of Gartner, so we are covered. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. People have never spent so much money in cybersecurity in the whole time of history, and people have never gotten so much breached. So spending in cybersecurity is not an answer. Buying shiny tools is not an answer. It's a necessity, but it's not the answer. There's a lot of work to do. Understanding your threats, like you said before, Isa, what is your risk appetite or risk tolerance? Who are your adversaries? How do you work? What are you trying to protect? How do you want it to work? All these things have to create like a process, a decision-making, and probably a XDR or a CrowdStrike will be part of the answer, but not will be the whole of the answer. My guess, my opinion on the chat anyhow.
But let me jump in there as well, because a lot of times when we talk about tools, I mean, especially if we take a look at XDR as this entire buzzword, a lot of times it starts at the perimeter of the organization, right? It's like, oh, we see a vulnerability, we see an intrusion, we see something happening, right? And I feel like that's too late. And we already mentioned attack staging earlier, because I think that's such a fascinating technology and framework.
I hear Heidi right now saying people and process in my head. I don't know if she's on listening, but I can hear her saying that.
No, it's definitely true. But you know, if we start seeing threat actors when they're already at the doorstep, I mean, it's too late, in my opinion. And from a threat actor's perspective, I mean, if they get stopped earlier, I mean, it's bad for them, right? And even me as a security researcher, if I take a look at tools, I look at how mad would I be if an organization has those, right? I mean, like, they implement it, and I see they have that, like, you know, like, what am I going to think? Because there are security tools out there where if you see them in an organization and you're like, whatever, you know, it doesn't matter, I'm still going to get in. But there are certain technologies where you're like, oh, shoot, this is actually something that could be dangerous. And shift left again is one of those buzzwords. But I think it's really interesting to shift left, not only in detection within the perimeter of our organization, but even shifting out of that. And I just got an email from Steven yesterday night, and he was like, I found another one, something like that was the subject, because we had this conversation last week, like, how quickly can you detect things, right? And if you would be able to actually detect threat actors preparing to attack you rather than they starting to attack you, I mean, that would be quite interesting, right? And turns out, and this is one of the reasons why I like ZENDATA so much and why we are having a lot of those conversations, that there is technology like that already built. And I'll pass it off to Steven to talk about the UBS story for just a second before we wrap it up.
I know I'm supposed to be in charge of timing, but I'm terrible at this. Steven.
Yeah, I mean, people who want to leave, they can leave. No, I know it's not supposed to happen like this, the webinars. It's our first one. We're allowed to do a little extra time. And then next time we promise we'll be on time. The anecdote of UBS that you're talking about, I think it's a good example, first of all, of the objectives. UBS is not smart enough to have chosen us for the cybersecurity. This is their mistake. But many of our customers work with UBS. And so us, if we want to protect correctly our customers, we have to monitor what's happening at UBS. And, you know, and we see some, of course, staging of attacks, buying similar domains to UBS, and these kinds of things happening. And this is really staging of attacks. We had something very similar. And for those who follow me on LinkedIn, I published it on LinkedIn just last week, something similar with FINMA, which is the financial regulator in Switzerland. And you know, these kinds of things get prepared by threat actors. Sometimes they don't make noise, sometimes they make noise. And in the case of UBS, very quickly we were able to identify this was something malicious. We were able to protect our customers with this. And then there's a legal process that you have to go through with law enforcement, with the registrars and all this, that enable you like to do the takedown and protect when these kinds of things happen. But sometimes you see this happening and no action is taken. And this is dangerous not only for the target, but for all the customers, all the partners, and all this. And this goes really back to how the cybersecurity industry is here to protect everyone and not just a single organization or only the paying customers.
Yeah,
So-
definitely. But in this case, I'm sorry, David. In this case, for example, between the noise made on the dark web and actually the potential launch, it took 40 minutes, and we actually had the takedown. So the hacker was actually not being able to start his attack. That's one of many cases. But David, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, no, but I actually want to add the 40 minutes. So I think I'll conclude this from my side by
Yes.
saying we need to shorten the time frame that threat actors have. And if we can actually, from the point where they start preparing an attack and they set up their attack infrastructure, if we can literally act within 40 minutes, and if we can shut down those preparations within 40 minutes, they didn't even start attacking us. We just shut down their preparations within 40 minutes. If we can get to that, rather than, oh, they've been inside of our network for 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can really shift and shorten the time frame from, well, 6 months within our network, we don't know about it, to 40 minutes since they started preparing and they're already shut down, I think that's what we have to do as organizations, as industry, in order to really get, hopefully at some point, one step ahead.
Definitely. And I think that's a very good way to end this first webinar. We've been talking about toolings. We've been talking about what happened in 2023. We've been talking about what we're facing ahead. But if all of you can go back within their organization and just ask, are we doing something about threat intelligence? And if we have threat intelligence feed, are we using them to prevent any potential attacks? That's also very key. Thank you so much, Steven.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Isabelle.
David.
Thank
It
you,
was a real
David.
pleasure to do this. I really enjoyed. And I hope everybody that's listening also enjoy it.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You get power off?
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah.
That's nice.